Is Prince Harry trying to hijack the late Queen's legacy? Why won't the King take Harry's calls? And what does Robert Jobson say in his fascinating new biography of Catherine? We'll answer all that and more in a great new show. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and this week my panel includes the Daily Mail's Richard Eden, and as a special guest this week, royal editor, broadcaster and biographer Robert Jobson. Robert will be telling us all about his exciting new book called Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and we look forward to hearing more. Before that, my weekly reminder to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't already. We have 290,000 subscribers, and we would love your help to get to that, over that 300,000 mark. All you need to do is press that subscribe button, the Daily Mail Royals YouTube page, and then you'll never miss another episode. So go on, if you don't already, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing. Well, Robert, to your incredible book now, Catherine, the Princess of Wales. And I think there's been so many narratives put upon Catherine over the years, haven't there? And there was always this narrative in the past, particularly in the British media, that Catherine was the one who followed William to St Andrews, had a real game plan for becoming a princess, and then went through her supposed weighty-caty years, waiting to be asked to be engaged, desperate to be a royal. But your book suggests that that's probably unfair.
Unfair and untrue. I mean, the reality is this is a girl that is very smart. I think when she left school, initially thought, okay, I'll go to university. That a lot of kids do. But she wanted to do art history. She was going there probably a bit naive and thought, no, I've got to go to Florence. I've got to see the real thing. I want a bit of a break from total academia, always doing your A-levels, getting this O-levels, A-levels, all these things. No, go and experience Venice. Go and experience Florence. Go and experience the great artists. And that's what she wanted to do. That's nothing to do with William. And then she went on the Rally International, but that was nothing to do with William either. And then she was on she had a different boyfriend when she went to university. So that doesn't really tally that she's plotting this great moment. What I did find out, what I was told, is that she did know William before she went to university, actually. And that probably explains why, not necessarily very close, but explained that, well, she was able to become a part of his circle and a friend, because they'd met when he was at Eton and she was at Marlborough. So that, again, is a different narrative. And that does sort of make more sense, that they were able to be friends and he was quite relaxed in her company because they'd met before. But she did have another boyfriend. She had Rupert Friends, and he had another girlfriend. So, it doesn't quite. I know it's The Crown. I know it's a great script, but it's not the truth.
Yeah, she wasn't some sort of Exocet missile. No. From speaking to people for the book, what is the picture that you've managed to paint of the person she is today?
Well, I think, as I said at the start, a very smart, resilient, strong person who's clever. And I think that we've had this Stretford Wife who had the weighty-caty years where she's supposed to be just hanging around, not true really, and then we've got this almost Stretford Wife period where she's, all she does is just look immaculate. There's a lot of people, and funnily enough, a lot of women, bizarrely, that have got this sort of, were very anti Catherine for many, many years. I don't really know why. And, what I found when I was talking to lots of people is just how she's very funny. She's not particularly relaxed in front of the media. We know that. She's quite careful. But she's a funny, smart, determined, driven person. And I think you have to be that. If you think about the things that she's had to put up with over the years and the attacks and things like that, even in recent years, she's shown herself, I think, to be the glue, really, for the British royal family in the years where we are approaching them, towards the middle of the 21st century. It's changing. There's no real deference anymore for the monarchy. A lot of younger people, ask questions of what it's all about. Yeah. So, and they're going to continue to do that. So her role, as somebody who was not born a princess, all her children are born princes and princesses. Her husband was born a prince to be king. Her father-in-law born to be king. No matter what we say, they have no real knowledge of what it's like to live like a normal person. But she went to work in a double-decker bus. She has had a flat in London. She has been on the tube. I know that people say she's very privileged. Her grandfather was a painter and decorator.
She worked at Jigsaw.
Her grandfather was a painter and decorator. That's not the normal path for someone who's going to be queen. And the bottom line, that's not in any way criticism. It's a total plus for a monarchy that needs to be in touch with its people. When the Queen Elizabeth became queen, most people thought she was, over 50% thought she was appointed by God. You know, there was a real deferential, there was real deference to the royal family in Britain. The class structure was completely different. It's going to be very different for King William and King George, if that's the names they keep, when in the latter part of the this century, and they're going to have to be relevant. And she is hugely important because I know she's privileged and she's went to good schools, etc. But she has an understanding of what the people really think, and she has been, she has been on the tube, she has been on the, and not in a way that was engineered by Diana to show the children the way it was. She's been amongst the real people.
But Richard, she's a fascinating figure, really, isn't she? Because I think we all know, particularly from social media, that there's a lot of people who think they really know who she is and what she's about and what she thinks. But actually, we don't know that much about the Princess of Wales.
No, in a way, I think she's really taken a leaf out of the book of the late Queen Elizabeth because of not giving those interviews. People are able to sort of project their own feelings almost onto her, and that was one of Queen Elizabeth's great strengths. Was someone could be a socialist and think, actually, you know what, I bet the Queen's sort of a bit like me, or the opposite. And I think that's a great strength. And remember, the only interview she has ever given is that engagement interview. That's been her only sort of proper sit down, and I think that's really has helped maintain that mystique, which is so important. And probably later in this programme we'll discuss the opposite about a certain royals who, keep giving interviews.
I'll only have to guess at what you're referring to there, Richard. We'll get to that later. But there's a really interesting section in the book, Robert, about Catherine's relationship with King Charles. She calls him Grandpa.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important, that whole business of a relationship with the king, because, I mean, you only have to realise how close they were when, they had that private lunch before the television announcement of her diagnosis, and they were there together. There was no William, there was just the two of them there. But you only have to see every time he sees her that his eyes light up, the king, and she's the one who's facilitated all the times that he can spend with his grandchildren who he adores, and she's the one that does all that, and she makes it work with William. When William and the king have not always seen eye to eye on
that's what I was
things.
going to ask you. Is like, how has she been?
Hugely important.
She's been the conduit between them, really, hasn't she?
Yeah, when they've fallen out over things. I mean, they fell out over. William saying he was going to destroy all the ivory in the royal collection. The king said you can't do that. All of these things, given the fact that it would probably pump the price of ivory through the roof. But and I think my understanding is at the moment the king is sort of making sure you can't go around destroying that when he's king. But the point of it is, they sometimes guys fall out. But she's a great solution finder. She's not somebody who's going to be looking to get involved in the drama and everything. Let's just make this work. And I think that's what you need in a family which are sort of prone to big egos and hierarchical situations. She could cut through all that nonsense and say, look, Louis wants to see the king and loves him, and that's the point.
Do you think that they've had their ups and downs, William and Charles, but do you think, are they good now, and is that because of Catherine?
Well, they're certainly better than they ever were. I mean, before all the Harry and Meghan thing, there's no doubt that Harry was much closer to the king before when he was young. In that period he was, and that's probably why it's been so hard for the king, I should think, with the whole split and the separation, because they had a connection. And William sometimes would be more difficult but I think that there's no doubt that they get on. The king, William was crestfallen when he heard that his father was diagnosed, and then absolutely devastated when he heard that Catherine was diagnosed.
Yeah, of course.
Now that would have changed his life completely, and he's had to rise to it, and he's been absolutely brilliant in dealing with that because of the impact it would have had upon his life. There he is, a young guy with 3 relatively young children, would have to step up to the role of sovereign, and the whole world would change for him. But he's risen to that. I think that shows you that Catherine in particular has been immense support to him, as well as him being immense support to her.
But it's interesting, isn't it? One area where the King and William have clashed and possibly continue to do so is over William's use of helicopters. This is fascinating.
Yeah, well, William is a a brilliant helicopter pilot. He's fully trained. He's done everything from flying with the RAF to doing the other, the air ambulance. But they are a dangerous form. We only have to say that it can be quite precarious. And I know it used to worry them, that late Queen Elizabeth, and she raised it on a number of occasions with William directly and said, look, you have to think about the succession. You cannot keep flying your family up to Amber Hall all as one. What if something happens? Nobody's saying that you're a bad pilot, but things happen, And she was always haunted by the death of one of her favourite pilots. She used to fly the Royal Flight. I think it was about 1968. It's always haunted her. But then, of course, the King is similarly worried. When he's been diagnosed with cancer, you obviously are facing your mortality. You think about the future. The future is William and his family. Now, if by some horrendous tragedy something happened and there were all the family in that flight up to Amber Hall from Kensington Palace, then we would have a situation. It would be quite a difficult situation. And so the King has said, in terms of in terms of the line of succession, the King has basically said that if you're going to do that and continue to do it, I don't want you to, but you'll have to sign a waiver to say it will be down to you. And I think the reason that was probably why...
that's not going to solve a lot, should the worst happen.
If you have to sign the document,
yeah,
it makes you think long and hard about, much harder than if you're just having a conversation, to sign it to say, yes, I accept total responsibility.
You've got strong feelings on this, haven't you, Richard?
Well, yeah, we've discussed the subject before, and I think it is an issue where Prince William needs to be told you can't do this, because
helicopters are bad
there are
news.
important issues at stake. Yeah. Yes, it doesn't matter how competent you are as a pilot. You only need something mechanical to go wrong, and it's not like a plane. They're extremely dangerous. So they just shouldn't travel together as a family. My goodness, imagine what would happen. I mean, let's be frank here. We do not want King Harry and Queen Meghan on the throne.
Well, you could end up with King Andrew.
Oh my goodness.
No, you couldn't.
Come on, I'm a monarchist, but that's enough to turn me Republican.
No, surely not.
I mean, because it's all to do with the line of succession. It's not to do with who's a working royal. Well, you'd certainly have a row going on, wouldn't you? People saying, well,
I think we need to go straight to making...
Technically, it's my right, and then you've got a problem, haven't you?
I mean, look, it's a morbid subject.
Let's go straight to making helicopters illegal from this point on. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think that's what Her Majesty was saying, and what His Majesty was saying.
He's quite stubborn, though, William, isn't he? Like his father. How is this going to play out?
Well, the document's been signed. I don't know. I mean, the reality is the King will not want it to happen. I think, actually, over time, there'll be a realisation that it can't happen.
Oh, well, if that hasn't made you want to read this book, I don't know what will. Robert's book is called Catherine, the Princess of Wales. It is out now in the UK, published by Bonnier Books, and is out in America next week, published by Pegasus Books. We'll have more from Robert and his book, particularly what it has to say about Prince Harry, later in the show. Now, Richard, before that, I wanted to ask you about one of your favourite royals, Princess Beatrice, who's picked up an accolade that we might not have expected even a short few years ago.
Yeah, this Princess Beatrice has been named by Society magazine Tatler as the best dressed person in Britain.
Wow.
Now, obviously, this is quite amusing given that she was criticised so much in the past. Our viewers will remember the famous pretzel hat.
Oh, were they ever going to be able to live those hats down, those poor princesses?
It was great, and she made the best of it by auctioning it off eventually for charity, I think. But it was the hat she wore to Prince William and Katherine's wedding back in 2011. Anyway, so they've highlighted that she has become very stylish, and we've discussed that on this programme before. I've noted in my diary column that she's been helped by taking on a stylist, Olivia Buckingham, and she's kind of given her some different options. But frankly, I'd rather hear your views on this, Jo. What do you think about her change in style?
I think she's looking incredibly chic. I really do. Best dressed in the whole country? I don't know.
There was one occasion where she and her husband Edo attended that wedding in Jordan, and she wore a couple of outfits that were really striking.
And very culturally appropriate for the event. Yeah, no, she really... And she's looking fantastic. There's just no doubt about it. And
maybe it's the Edo effect.
Well, she's the one royal I've met on a number of occasions, and she's utterly charming as well. So, I say, good on you, B. Yeah. Good on you. But, Robert, it is a topic we've discussed quite a lot on this programme. Could there be a more significant role for the York sisters in the royal family, considering, you know, they are by default quite slimmed down at the moment, aren't they?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I think the
that's
king
a bit harsh.
I think the king has clearly made his position, set it out, and I think there are a lot of people calling for that. I don't think it'll happen because it's the way he's got his team, and it's a moment, a transition team, and it's already been set up. And then the focus of attention will then move to the Waleses, the Williams family, and that is the core royal family that will be the future going forward. Supported maybe by some, but not very many. And if you extend that even further, the cost gets extended. All the business of who's living in what palace, who's getting security, who's not getting security, it's something that they've got to focus on and to get it down to the core. And in, say, 10 years' time, when the transition may officially happen, we don't know. God save the king, as I say, but the reality is then William's children will be that much further, that much older and further down the line. I mean, I think Beatrice has got a lot to offer, but it's the royal family is changing. You know,
that is your buzz well and truly killed, Richard.
Well,
he's still going to keep trying.
That's the position with King Charles now, but what I hope is when Prince William does eventually become king, he might see the value of having his cousins involved, just as Queen Elizabeth did.
Well, considering he doesn't have a wingman of a sibling the way that Charles does.
Exactly, and remember, all the planning for that slimmed-down monarchy that Charles did in the past was on the basis of Harry and his eventual family having a key role as supporters.
Yep.
So it does make a big difference.
Watch this space, Princess Beatrice. Well, if you do like great royal content, you might want to know about our brand new show. Well, it's not our brand new show, it's Richard's brand new show, featuring the one and only Richard Eden himself. Check this out.
We know how much you love looking at royal photographs. So join me for a special programme as I take a fresh look at the fallout between Prince William and Prince Harry through some of their most fascinating pictures and rarely seen moments. It's called Reading the Royals, and you can watch it here on the Daily Mail Royals channel.
Look out for our own Richard Eden on Reading the Royals next week. Can't wait. Now, let's hear some of your comments. Stephanie Johansson says of the Princess of Wales, protect Catherine at all costs. She's not only your princess, but an international asset. People all over the world love her. While Moonlight Sonata writes, the Duke of Kent, at the age of 89, doing a string of engagements this week, including opening a new lifeboat station in Kent. Imagine that, a royal duke actually living a life of service and doing engagements to represent his dukedom. Let's see, how many engagements did Harry and Meghan do in Sussex? Did Harry and Meghan ever even go to Sussex? Meow. Diane Gilchrist says of Harry's legal battle to get the UK to provide police security. If Harry is so worried about security, why did he go to Nigeria? Okay, so let's bring the panel back in now, Richard, to a very interesting article that has just appeared in People magazine overnight, suggesting that the King is no longer taking Harry's calls.
Well, what time of year is it, Joe? It's August.
Whatever do you mean?
It seems to become a tradition that when the royal family are on summer holiday, the California-based royals step into the breach.
Spring to life.
People magazine, which our viewers might remember is the favoured outlet for the Sussexes, has a string of stories this week. Quite extraordinary stories that even quote sometimes sources close to the king, and you're thinking, really?
Yeah, which sources would these be?
Yeah, well, this one anyway is all about Harry's disappointment that his father, the king, won't take his calls anymore. Now, this is something that we kind of know, but by briefing in this way, he clearly hopes that we'll have some difference, but I'm not sure it's the best way to go about it.
Is this new, Robert the King not taking Harry's calls?
Well, he doesn't take them, and you know he has taken them in the past. But I think anybody that knows the situation is that who would want to keep taking calls if the conversation just ends in slang a match about money and legal fees and things like that? You know, so I think that
is that what you genuinely believe?
I think the King has got too much on his plate, and he's been not well at all. He's been dealing with that. He's been only, you know, he's just become the king. He's got too much to deal with rather than dealing with Harry's constant, you know, demands.
And I suppose there's always the worry, isn't there, that it's more fodder for more content on various platforms.
Well, let's look back to what actually happened. So last time it was the King's birthday. we had stories appearing. It was on the BBC, in fact, that Harry was going to be having a telephone call with his father. And then when it did happen, there was a call for the birthday. We heard all about it afterwards. We heard exactly what happened, not just Harry, but also Meghan was on the phone, and even there were some words with the children. So, you know, the BBC and other outlets got a full briefing by pure chance.
It's very difficult, though, isn't it, for the
happened.
king? It's very difficult because, you know, he, as a father, he obviously still loves his son. Obviously,
Yes.
Of course he does. And he loves his grandchildren. But when he's got that call coming in and you're dealing with issues there, then you've got the fallout from maybe William, maybe the Queen Camilla saying, why are you doing this? So it must be very difficult. And I think he probably wants to avoid the drama and go mushroom picking or
Well,
something.
there was another article there as well, which was interesting, that suggests that Meghan would like Harry to get off this lawsuit roller coaster he's been on for the past few years. This is interesting, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if he wants to get off the lawsuit roller coaster, he just has to make a call to his lawyer. So I just think that maybe they're trying to balance the books there, aren't they? Are they going to actually settle on certain things? It's another planted story, and to me, it's quite simple, isn't it? You know, if you're going to put yourself in a position where you could possibly end up losing and costing you multi-millions in fees and costs, it's a dangerous game.
Preempted my next question. Do you think that that is just sort of like a shot across the bow to lay the groundwork for, you know, we haven't lost this court case, we're just receding?
Well, I think also it's a sign that all may not be well in Montecito, you know, because here we have, you know, Meghan, Harry's favourite outlet, People magazine, briefing that Meghan's would like these to end, these legal actions.
Maybe it's good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
One's briefing, and one's going to go all the way, the other one said, I'm ready to set, you know.
Exactly. I mean, you know, in a way, it kind of could pave the way for Harry to withdraw from some of these legal actions and then say, well, he's doing it for the sake of his family or whatever.
Certainly giving the extraordinary interview he gave earlier, last week rather, all about the claims about phone hacking by the British media would suggest that he's doubling down here. And tell us about that interview and why the late Queen has suddenly been dragged into it.
Yeah, so this is very important. So this was last Thursday, just after Paz Confidential. It was an ITV documentary in Britain that Harry contributed to. He was interviewed, and it was all about his legal actions against the popular press in Britain. You know, I wasn't happy about it at all, personally, because the programme lumped in the Daily Mail with two other groups who have, in their case, they've admitted wrongdoing in the past, which the Daily Mail never has. It's always denied that. But so the Mail featured in this programme. But what Harry did, he gave a long interview about it, and he claimed that his late grandmother, the Queen Elizabeth, was on his side, that he'd had lots of discussions with her, and that she would be urging him to continue with it. And
that doesn't sound that credible, does it?
No.
Well, it's also deeply unfair. I mean, you know, the Queen's not here to say yes or no, and I don't believe. I mean, the Queen is always someone who was a pragmatist, and she would try to find solutions and resolutions to situations. So it's easy to quote and say, my granny would have wanted me to go all the way. Well, she's not here to say
Yeah,
that.
and I suspect that would have been another case of recollections may vary.
Yeah, I mean, I've written a piece, the viewers can see for Mail Plus today about this, and we've seen it with Harry in the past, where he's very much tried to sort of claim Diana's legacy as his own. Well, now he seems to be trying to do that with Queen Elizabeth as well.
And also the Queen wouldn't, I mean, if you remember with all the situations and all the controversies, the Queen actually you was desperately saying, no, you have to deal with your father first. She was not getting involved in any of this mess. You know, she said, you must, because she was aware of her own mortality. She was aware that the king, the Prince of Wales, was going to become the king. You have to deal with your father. That was what she was saying. That doesn't sound the same. You know, what does your father think? That's what she would be saying. She wouldn't be sick. You go all the way, Harry, and fight.
You
spend
take
as
on
much of
the
your
media.
as much money that you can, and fighting them all the way. She's a constitutional monarch, an unelected constitutional monarch, intrinsically part of our establishment system, of which, for love it or loathe it, so is the media.
Yeah.
And she was somebody who understood that system better than anybody.
There was also what sounded like it could be a dig at William, wasn't there?
Yes, this was very interesting. This was, again, when talking about his mother, Harry was saying he was quite angry with the suggestions that she was paranoid. He was saying, well, actually, she wasn't paranoid. She had good reason to be suspicious because he thought that people might have been hacking her phones back then. I should say there's no evidence that that was happening. But this was, I think it was a dig at Prince William, because in his statement after the BBC Martin Bashir scandal, William had said that Bashir had contributed to his mother's paranoia. So, he thought she was paranoid. So this was sort of
But
Harry
it was such a different era. There was no... it was the analogue phone era when people were listening in on, they had their setups in their gardens and they could hear the things on the radio waves. That's why you had Squidgygate. That's why you had Camilla Gate, because things were being pumped out on the airways. And also, I don't think it didn't become a criminal offence until much later. So all of these things said they were hacked. Someone was listening to them because they had analogue phones, and in those days it was a completely different scenario. It was completely different.
What did you make of the interview, Robert, and the suggestions in there about other members of the family?
I must admit I was disappointed with ITV because he obviously had set out some parameters of what he would speak about, and they didn't ask him any questions which were difficult for him to answer. Such as? Well, I mean, when you're talking about your privacy being breached, what about Spare, where people weren't even consulted? What about the accusations that were made in documentaries? What about these things where they didn't have the right to reply? So I just think that it was a bit rich, really, to sort of be so critical of, to almost be so pious. And I think that something's got to give in all of this. And what is the? I think people have got to look at what is the objective of all these interviews. The ITV interview, I thought, was a pretty patsy. I thought it was just a bit. They just let him say what he wanted to, and they had an agenda. They mapped all newspapers were lumped into a great big, piece of rubbish in the corner. They are the evil ones. There was no analytical thought, and I thought it was a very poor show from ITV. Well, this could be a very good point to come back to your book now, Robert, and a very interesting quote in there where you write that the so-called Harry problem, as it's known among palace staff, continues to plague the king. And then you quote a palace official who says, "What worries His Majesty and his top team is what is going to happen when all the money runs out." Precisely. What is going to happen? That's the whole point. And the king is fully aware of that, because at some stage, the currency of talking about your family endlessly, of which he's made a career for the last few years, is going to become less and less, because number one, they're not many people really dealing with him anymore. We've already said that the phone calls aren't getting through. So what you've got to say is less and less relevant. The distance becomes further and further apart, and the closer his brother comes to the throne, he's the relevant person. So is his family. And this guy, rather like even Edward VIII, who overnight, when he became the Duke of Windsor, became a rather sad, wealthy but ridiculous person. Well, is the money going to run out? And what happens if it does? What will they do? Well, if you keep spending money on every litigation in the world, and it's okay if you win, but if you start losing a couple, that's not going to be good. And also, if the money they have a very expensive lifestyle. They've got security. They've got, they're flying all over the world. They're doing all sorts of things. Doing their own royal tours to Nigeria. Of course, it cannot go on indefinitely. And if it does run out, I'm sure he'll say to his father, who was very generous, by the way. Over many years, he was very generous to Harry, giving him a lot of money. Even when he left, he was still giving him money, and it wasn't even acknowledged. Then I suppose he's going to have to come cap in hand to his father or his brother, but I'm not sure that they're necessarily going to be that generous. Oh, Lord. Richard, since a lot of these big money deals, as some finished, some ongoing, hasn't really been an obvious source of income for them for next steps, has there? Well, there's been an interesting development this week, actually, which is the next big money-making project for the couple is Meghan's lifestyle company, American Riviera Orchard, and the Netflix programme that ties in with that, which she's completed filming, but it was reported this week that it won't be broadcast now until next year. Well, the thinking was that it would be autumn, but it's been put back. So, well, that's generally a bad sign, right? Well, I mean, who knows? But it makes you wonder. Obviously, things are not ready, and Netflix, for whatever reason, or Meghan wants to wait. So, again,
that would suggest, is this, are they happy with it? You know, we'll find out
Yeah.
eventually.
But there has to be a limit. They're not going to live on jam alone. You know,
Well, you can't make a TV show about
There's
jam.
going to be a limit, and also people, you know, if they're going to maintain a degree of interest, people in America in particular, they want to know the inside track. Well, if you haven't got the inside track anymore, then, you know, what are you going to talk about?
Well, that's why I think they hope that Meghan will be a star in her own right and will be having this, you know, cookery show, and people will want to buy things that feature in it. But
Good
whether
luck
that's
with
the
that.
case, yeah, we'll see.
Well, Robert, you also look at the relationship between Meghan and Katherine in your book. Was it doomed from the start?
Now, I always think that why did everyone expect, just because two brothers married two different women, that these two women become the best of buddies? I mean, not all sisters-in-law necessarily get on. They come from very different backgrounds. And clearly there was
Well, I think, sorry to interrupt, but because they were both non-royal marrying into this extraordinary situation, you would think that would forge a bond.
Well, I think they were very different women, and also when you only have to look at that first gathering of when they put them at the palace, in a way, put them all together under the foundation on that stage and being interviewed, there was clear friction. And I'd be interested to
Really?
to see the photographs. Well, you saw William's response, and just watch. Maybe this should be one for
Is this
Richard.
in Reading Royals?
Without saying too much,
Watch
I would say
watch those stills.
Reading the Royals.
Okay,
yeah.
I will.
And
yeah.
I think it was clear. It was clear that there was some. It was all rather jokey, but many a thing is said in jest, and it was clear that there was a lack. The hierarchy was not being necessarily adhered to. William very much was the number one person, or was supposed to be, and it was all about. It was all about Meghan. Look, I think that why should they be together? I think Catherine tried. I think they just, there was I think the whole thing of it's so mad and on about bridesmaids dresses and things, but look, all of that was a mix-up. But I think once she'd said what she said on Oprah,
Yeah.
and once she's effectively, whether it was true or not, accusing someone who's clearly not racist of racism, and the king accused of racism. I think some of these things that have been said, there's no way back.
So you think that, because that's often said about William and Harry, that they can't be reconciled, but is there any
It's so sad. I
hope
remember
for
there was
Catherine and Meghan?
I don't think there's any need for Catherine and Meghan, because
Right.
I don't think we're going to see an awful lot of Meghan in this country anyway. But for William and his brother, I mean, I was around when they were little boys, and they were like real, great kids. And it must be very difficult for what they've been through together, the loss of their mother, all the things like that. I think William was a terrific older brother, and I just think they've fallen out. I think because William was probably not subtle enough when it came to Harry's love for Meghan, or something happened there.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad in a way that they can't rebuild it. It's like two young stags have locked horns, and it's not going to change. And you see the king, who's in this dotage of his life, he's reached this pinnacle to be the king, and he's got to deal with all this. I just think they should both be. I think William has tried, but even so, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if they were just to give him some peace at this time in his life and take away the angst. And it is angst that the king has experienced.
Do you think, Richard, that it's all just a bit of a bridge too far for even the so-called peacemaker Catherine?
I think Catherine is a natural diplomat, a natural peacemaker. But frankly, if my wife had been abused, on national TV as much as she was by Meghan, I would not expect her. It would be.
I have no
unkind.
plans to abuse your wife on
No,
TV.
it would be cruel of William
Well,
to
she's
expect
like
her
that thing,
to.
Richard, when they had to get, and again, it's another one. I'm sure in your new programme you're going to look at the photographs, look at the stills of that moment of after the Queen, Her Majesty passed, and they had to do that walkabout where Catherine, I know, told someone that it was the hardest thing she ever had to do. Just look at the photographs and look at the body language as they get out the car, and just do a click, 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 click. It was difficult, and that, I think, a picture tells it's 1,000
I think
words.
Catherine will do her duty as she always does, but I'm sure we won't be seeing happy pictures of her and Meghan in the future.
Oh dear. Well, it's time for me to cue the fanfare. That's right, it's the Princess Anne section of the show. Where would we be without it? Richard, judging by the photos, she has been pretty much everywhere during the Olympics. What's Anne been up to?
Well, Princess Anne, as a member of the International Olympic Committee, has been enjoying herself in Paris, and she's been there the whole week. She's been attending loads of events and will have particularly enjoyed the success of the equestrian team. I thought the one thing I enjoyed seeing was Princess Anne wearing a bucket hat. I thought, sometimes these days you kind of see people, wearing them while they're raving at festivals or whatever. But,
I like a bucket hat.
But Princess Anne was carrying off her bucket hat with aplomb.
I love that.
But I'm not sure we should expect to see the bucket hat again on particular sort of formal occasions.
Well, Robert keeps telling us the monarchy's changing. So, I mean, you never know.
The monarchy might be changing, but one thing is that the Princess Royal is not changing for anyone.
What have been your experiences of covering engagements with Anne?
I've covered a couple, and I think I remember going to the Royal Warrant Holders Association dinner, and it was one of the few white tie dinners there, and she was speaking, and off the cuff, she was utterly a brilliant speaker. I mean, and she had the whole place, all these many old duffers in the white tie, like me, and she was just a natural wit, very, very clever, very similar to her father. Had the whole audience in the palm of her hand. I mean, yes, people. I mean, I remember some of the people in the palace would say, Princess Anne's done the most job, and others would say, well, I don't count walking in one room and walking out as a job. But there's all that little competition going on. I think she's fantastic, and she's great value, sharp as a tack, and I'm glad she's recovered from a recent injury,
Indeed.
and she, which was quite bad by the sound of it. But she was pretty robust and is back doing the job. And, the one thing I'm sure the King is thankful for every morning is his sister's there to back him up.
Hear, hear. No, I'm pretty damn sure she was not going to miss the Olympics for anything. Well, after the Olympics, we can expect to see Anne up in her beloved Scotland, where the royals usually decamp for much of the summer, particularly to the Balmoral estate, of course. Well, here are some of our favourite pictures of the royals north of the border. Bonnie Scotland there. Well, my thanks to Robert Jobson, and a reminder that his new book is called Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and is out now in the UK, published by Bonnier Books, and it will be out in America next week, published by Pegasus Books. My thanks also to Richard Eden and to you, of course, for watching. We'll have a special episode next week where Richard Kay gives us his reaction to the royal year so far. We'll see you then.